go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am very, very excited. This room was presented today by SMART. She was not able to be here today. Obviously, they were quite busy. But with that being said, there is transit up for vote right now. Well, I cannot tell you which direction to vote. I can tell you to please do so. But obviously, please look into the new transit bill. There's some very interesting things happening. I will not tell you my view, but I will say I really love SMART. That was fun. That was a nice way to plug it. So, all right, it is my pleasure to introduce Rawley VanFossen. He's the Executive Director in Capital Area Housing Partnership. He has lived in the greater Lansing community for over 10 years, so you understand his drive in that giant cloud this morning. So, he previously worked for the Michigan House of Representatives as a legislative aide, focusing on analyzing the impact and need for affordable housing in urban environments, tourism in local communities, and meeting Michigan's energy needs. Prior to his employment with the state of Michigan, Rawley worked for the Ingham County Land Bank Fast Track Authority as their property disposition and community relations manager. His experience includes real estate transactions, strategic property planning, public relations, community-based organizing, board management, and grant management. You are not busy at all. Rawley serves on the board of directors for the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan and in the Ingham County Continuum of Care. Welcome, Rawley.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. And it's my mom, if you're not familiar, is Rawley VanFossen. She's the ombudsman for SMART for Oakland County. Yes, no bias in any of that. And I can tell you as a non-resident of Oakland County to vote yes for the SMART millage. If you're not a fan of public transportation, get out of the room because you're not a fan of mine. But thank you for the Troy Chamber for having me today. I'm excited. We're going to have a great 45 minutes conversation about one of my favorite topics, something that I deal with every single day of my life, both in my job and some of the extracurriculars that I'm involved in, which is motivating and engaging board of directors. I'm going to go through some slides. I'd like to keep this informal. There is going to be some time for questions at the end, but if there's something in particular on that slide and you think it's going to be a short question, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll definitely come back to it towards the end of the presentation. I printed, I thought just enough, but there's a couple of you who walked in afterwards. I'm happy you'll see my email at the end. I've got business cards. I can email this presentation out. The chamber has access to it as well if you weren't able to get a printed copy. With that being said, we are going to jump right in. I won't cover too much because Tara did a great job explaining of who I am, but I am from Oakland County. I was born and raised up in northern Oakland County. Hopefully you're familiar with Lake Orion. And then I moved out to Lansing and have been out there ever since. I have a lot of time, but I love coming in to Oakland County. I love my drive down 75 this morning, albeit the fog. Obviously, neighbors are my passion. That's what you're going to learn from me today. I like to talk. I like to talk to my neighbors, and I like to talk to people in the community because at the end of the day, it's all of us who get an impact, whatever space or field we choose to be in. Clearly, in my space is housing, and you're going to learn a lot about that today, but you may represent a nonprofit here in the community that does something different. Food access, education, children work, albeit a lot of these things are going to stay constant to all the work we do together. Everything that I see with motivating and engaging your board of directors is going to start first with defining the relationship. Who are your board of directors? Who are you? What role do you serve? Are you an executive director in this room? Are you senior management of your nonprofit? Are you a board member? Are you a program staff? Are you a volunteer of the nonprofit? We all have to start with first defining who we are in the relationship with our nonprofit. What does it mean to be a board member? That comes with a heavy responsibility. The first thing I do when onboarding new board members at our nonprofit, whether they're coming in from another maybe never had any experience serving in a volunteer capacity, is setting the expectation from day one. What are you looking for as a board member? How often do you meet? Do you guys meet monthly? Do you meet quarterly? Do you not meet at all? Those are things you should be thinking about when considering working with day to day, if not monthly, somebody who serves on your board of directors. You gotta set the tone, because at the end of the day, we're the leader in the room. If you're the director of your organization, you're driving that every day. A board member just may be seeing you once a month. So they're really gonna look for you to know what to do. Does that change with board officers? So first, what is a board officer? You might have a board of directors of varying size. The one I work on is 15 people, but within that, we have board officers. And board officers should be outlined in your organization's bylaws. If you don't have bylaws, write that down as a great place to start, because that's where the relationship is going to be defined. So board officers are going to be your chair. Sometimes you have a vice chair, a treasurer, and usually a secretary. Those are usually the 4 identified officer roles in your bylaws. Without those 4 positions, at minimum, a treasurer, chair, and a secretary, you can't function as a nonprofit here in the state of Michigan, incorporated at least. And that carries a level of responsibility beyond just a regular board member. So again, make sure you're defining that relationship when you're choosing who those folks are on your board of directors, because it's going to come with some legal things required. Where are those commitments defined? Again, your bylaws first and foremost, but you can take it a step further, because the bylaws is going to say who gets to be on the board and for how long, when you vote them in and out, but it's not going to get into the nitty-gritty about your nonprofit. How often do you meet? How often do committees meet? And so think about, when you're engaging your board of directors, what's an additional document or you can create to complement the work you do. It can be a commitment form that outlines, we're going to have 12 meetings a year. You're expected to be at every meeting. We expect you to participate in at least one committee if you have committees. You may put fundraising asks in that commitment form, but consider having your board of directors annually, not just the first time they get on the board, annually sign a board commitment form. Again, it refreshes their memory. It refreshes your memory of why are we all here and what are we committed to be doing. Mission, vision, and values. You go ahead.
Do you find that the executive director should be pushing out that commitment form, or do you ask the board chair to represent?
So the question was, who should push out the commitment form? Is it a director's responsibility or maybe your board chair? It's going to be unique. And so with the way our organization runs, it's heavy on the executive director leading the charge with administrative tasks, such as the board commitment form. However, I spin it a bit and I might prep it in the monthly board packet for that month where we're going to be talking about it, but I make it sure that my board chair knows, hey, drive this home at the meeting. So I may have done all the behind the scenes work. I'm likely doing the follow-up afterward and collecting the signatures and whatnot, but it's nice to make sure that your chair or somebody else on your board maybe drives that home a little bit more, takes pressure off of you as a director sometimes, not always being the one asking them what to do and how to do it. But again, it can be you. So mission, vision, and values. What does these mean? And why are they important? I'm assuming, I'm going to make some general assumptions today that we're all connected to a nonprofit, hence why we're at the nonprofit conference. So every nonprofit should have a mission. It's the basis of what you do. There's legal reasons to have a mission. In your incorporation documents with the state of Michigan, your mission is outlined on those documents that are recorded with the state. You probably have your mission on your website, almost everything you put out to the community, brochures, etc. Why is that important? Your mission is going to govern, outside of your bylaws and some of those technical things, ultimately what you and your board are doing and really answering the question of why. Why are we doing it? So our mission at Capital Area Housing Partnership is to develop strong and diverse communities through affordable housing. And so every day, every month, every year, when we're engaging as a board or in the community, I know that those 15 people plus me, at minimum, are there because of that mission. And they have some belief or some attitude towards it. Vision, though, or that vision then leads you to what you're going to do. The mission might define your work. It's the vision that's going to ultimately help drive it. And then values is going to come in here at the end, and it's going to govern how you act. What are your values as a nonprofit? We might have a mission to create more affordable housing, but what are the values we hold and how we do that? We have a value to ensure a diverse pool of community members who have access to our houses and our programs. We hold a value of creating an inclusive environment at work and allowing staff and board members to participate. Again, values are going to ultimately complement the work your mission is asking you to do. Are these important, do you think, for your board members to know and carry home every day or every month in which they're engaging you? Absolutely. Because again, they're representatives. I have 15 people for free who get to represent our organization out in the community. You're going to have that as well. They have to know your mission. They have to know your vision, and they have to know those values that govern all of what that does. Build on their passion. This is probably the biggest thing I have a challenge with when considering engaging board of directors. Why are they there? Beyond the mission. Everybody bought into affordable housing is good and needed in this community. Or everybody bought into this idea that everybody should have access to healthy, affordable food options. Whatever the mission is, you're bought into it first and foremost at that point. But what beyond that brings that person home? So let's get personal about it. Ask your board members, each one of them, why? Why is this mission important to you? Guarantee they're going to all have probably a slightly different answer. I've got folks on my board, they're there because they grew up in poverty. They grew up in affordable housing or in the projects or whatever word they wanted to find. I've got other board members who didn't. They grew up a privileged lifestyle, but they see others in the community. And so right there, their passions are different. One comes from a personal experience. One comes from seeing their neighbors struggle, yet they have that passion. And it's important for you as a leader to know what those passions are, because you get to poke and pull on it. Because if I know your passion is because you personally experienced struggles with housing as you grew up, I might be able to use your story differently than I would the other person who grew up in a point of privilege and didn't experience it. Maybe that's a newsletter, maybe that's a fundraising event, maybe that a one-on-one engagement with a donor. If you want to bring a board member, well, if I'm going to go court a donor for a project and I need money from them, I might bring the board member who has personal experience over the board member who just thinks it's important and good to have in the community. That's great, I appreciate that, but you got to play, you got to know when to use your board member. Again, think of them, they are free assets to your organization. If you're not using them and you're not making money with them, then you're missing a point on their passion. Go ahead.
Would you do that as a one-on-one private conversation? Would you do that as a paperwork survey so that nobody has to
Sure.
say it out loud?
Sure.
Or would we give them time to think about it? Or would you want to hold and give them back?
Sure.
The board member.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about it from
Sure.
the perspective.
Sure.
So if you do it,
Sure.
in that's successful.
So the question is, how to ask that? What's the right space? It's going to be unique to you and your board. It's because I think all of the ideas you just laid out are all great examples. I think you could do it one-on-one definitely. That may be the first place you want to do it. So you can get internally as the director, give them a moment to reflect and work with that board member one-on-one first. However, I think it's important too as a group to acknowledge what brings us all to the table so that you as a board member, that's a great example, is to know why your colleagues sitting next to you are here as well. Again, we all know the mission, but it's also would be interesting to know as a board member, colleague to colleague, well, what brought you here? Is it different than me? Or is it the same? Can we build on that? So again, you may want to start first one-on-one with your executive director so that they get an opportunity to figure out how to build it. Because at the end of the day, you want them to be most successful first because they're the ones working for the nonprofit every day, ideally. And so you want to empower them with the best tools in their toolkit, but then build from that and decide, maybe have an annual board conversation about it. Maybe if you've got a vacancy on your board, it's a good time to reflect on that as a group. Let's try to generate new ideas. Let's talk about our passion. It's absolutely a great idea to be talking about it. Trust their expertise. So now we figured out the mix. Go ahead.
I think just to address that, so, in a board interview, that might be an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
We interview all of our board members, obviously, before they come on, and so that might be a question that you could ask, what passion brings you to the table?
Yeah.
That sort of, right, where you don't feel right, and just, kind
Absolutely.
of.
Yeah, it shouldn't be it's not a pointed question. It's not a gotcha answer what you're looking for. It's just truly why? Why are you willing to serve? It also might help you, maybe you're not the right person. If I found out that somebody's passion is to not create affordable housing, or that they think it should only be in one part of town or all away from all of these suburbs or whatever people are saying, well, I'm going to learn right then and there. Your passion really doesn't fit with our mission, our values, and our vision. Actually, I'm glad to know that your passion is to do exactly what we're not trying to do here. And you might ask them to leave, or you might not ask them to join the board if it's during an interview process. So we've defined that what we know governs us first and foremost. We've defined that our board members have to then have a passion with that mission. Now let's figure out what they're good at. Why are they being on the board? Why are you asking somebody to be on your board? Or in some cases, if you're the board member, why are you coming to be on the board? Is it because you just have free time? That's great. We definitely need the board members to have time to commit, whether it's meetings, committees, one-on-one, community events. Absolutely, there's a time commitment need. But what else? And so where are they experts at? And how can you as the director and the board pull on those strengths? So when we talk about pulling on their strengths by determining their passion, also let's figure out what they're good at. That's likely the first question is, what is their day job? Or if they're retired, what is their previous employment? That's likely where you're going to first pull on their expertise. Classic example are lawyers or accountants. And so I'm privileged to have 3 lawyers on our board, and I love it because whenever we're in a crunch or we have to create an agreement or a special document, I can call 3 lawyers who I know will help. And if they can't do it or they're not willing to do it pro bono, they've got a Rolodex of other folks in the legal community who can connect us to. That's the shortest and easiest example. An accountant. We all have to do budgets. We all have to do accounting, whether it's day-to-day, weekly. You know, you might have a multi-million-dollar budget. You might have a $50,000 annual budget. It's important as a director to know the ins and outs of all of that. If you have an accountant on their board, you got questions, what a great person to be able to pick up the phone and call. Expertise doesn't just have to be the legal or accounting. It could be you work for the chamber and Tara sits on your board. Well, Tara's got a wealth of connections, I imagine, here in Oakland County. Pull on her expertise when you're looking to get a foot in the door somewhere or host a community event. She's probably got some free resources she can give you. That expertise, though, can go above and beyond, again, just employment. It could connect back to their passion. Their expertise can connect to who they know. Fundraising. Assume every nonprofit is fundraising. If you're not, tell me how and why you don't and how you get by, because I would love not to fundraise something because it's hard. Nobody likes asking people for money. It's an awkward conversation. If you're a director, you got to get over it. If you're a board member, guess what? You got to get over it. If you're a director in this room and your board members aren't assisting with fundraising, you've got work to do. We have a commitment on our board. Every single board member pledges to raise, either they donate themselves or they bring it in through their network, whether it's one other person, company sponsorship, 10 of their friends, but every board member of mine has to raise $1,000 a year. So that right there, I'm guaranteed $15,000 every year. Some of them, again, if they're privileged enough, they'll write the check themselves, or they'll get their company to sponsor annually. Or I've got folks who are neighborhood presidents and they don't have a network of people who can write those sizes of checks. So they get 10 friends to write $100. Go ahead.
So you define the dollar amount, because
I do.
and I'm glad you do, because I have in the past been told, no, we can't.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why not? Because
Right.
if you have people that are able to give,
Right.
I think there should be a dollar amount, at least something.
Right.
But then I was told by a board member, well, you're limiting those that have capacity to give more. Not necessarily,
Right.
because you as a board member know you have more to give.
Absolutely.
Then step up and give it.
Yep.
As opposed to saying, no, you're only asking me for 1,000, but I can give you 5.
Right.
Well, then please lead by example.
Absolutely. If you got a board member who can get 5 and they're only giving 1,000, then yes, that door needs to be kicked wide open.
But thank you.
A great way we talk about it is called a goal. We have a goal. Every board member has a goal to bring $1,000 to the table. That way, if they feel the pressure that they can't or whatnot or have struggles, it can be worked on and staff can help figure that out. That's why I meet every board member. We have a one-on-one specifically about this conversation. And it's so I can understand how they're going to bring it in. Are they going to bring it in themselves, their company? Do they have access to more?
Sure.
Or especially I do this for those who feel they can't get there, because those are the folks who are going to need the help. Those who can, that's the easy ones. Get those checked out the door. It's those who need the help where you're going to have to motivate and engage and get creative.
So then how often do you meet with your board members?
Sure.
Is that yearly?
Sure. So for my company, we have monthly board meetings, and then we have committees. We have 5 committees, and one of them is fundraising. And so that committee, all of our committees meet every other month. So ultimately, they get 6 meetings a year. So fundraising is where this conversation starts, but then it's at least annually brought to the full board for a conversation.
But then you address it with the board member individually.
We do, yeah,
Like once a year.
once a year at minimum. Yeah, again, those who can write the check, those are the easy ones. That's a 5-minute call, especially if they're renewing board members. I might not even have to do it because I know Tom, I know this company is going to sponsor the event. I know it's going to be more than the $1,000. Next, it's those who really have the hard time getting there that I spend more time working with. Again, it's really sitting them down to say, it's not that hard. In one, it doesn't have to be done in one city. You've got 12 months. And if you're a nonprofit who's planning your fundraising, you might have 2 or 3 fundraisers throughout the year. So instead of looking at it as $1,000 today, divide it by the 2 events you're doing and say, well, how about our goal is 500 for this event, 500 for that. Different times of the year breaks it up. But I tell you, there are ways. Emails, texts, letters, Facebook, Giving Tuesday is coming up. If you're not familiar with Giving Tuesday, this has been a blessing. Not a social media fan, but this tool specifically for board members has been the easiest way for us to donate or fundraise money. And the easiest way for me to engage and motivate board members who struggle with bringing in money. I had a board member who every year I know he feels it's an awkward thing for him. He doesn't like fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. I got him on Facebook 2 years ago with Giving Tuesday, and he brings in $1,000 every year. And he's blown away. He's like, I didn't realize my friends cared about what I do. And it took him 5 minutes. Guess what? We write the post for him too. I give him everything. He just has to go and click, post. And within 24 hours, he's got the $1,000. Go to you and then you and then. Go ahead, right here. You gotta take it head on. At the end of the day, for me, it gets back to, I'm hired, go back to defining the relationships. You're the executive director in this room. You're hired by the board. You are their employee. Everybody who works for you as a director, those are your employees. My board tasks me with building a team that fits within our budget, but at the end of the day, they expect me to lead the company day to day. And so when I find those tough conversations and engaging board members, I also have to reflect back, well, they hired me. It's my job to open that door. It might feel like, well, who's a board member? They should be, starting this conversation. It is, but at the end of the day, you're collecting the paycheck. They're the volunteer. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was speaking to another leader of a nonprofit, and they mentioned in terms of board agreements, customizing them per board member. Is that something you would recommend? Because you do have some people who are not in a position to fundraise or give as far as a monetary donation, but may be able to donate something that is technology based or some sort of technical assistance or some other way to support the organization.
Sure. I think that's a great example. And it gets back to, if it's unique and it works for your organization, great. I think for us, we have the same commitment form, but there's definitely room on it to get specific. And the example I'll use is that $1,000 conversation. That's specific to every board member. And so while we have a unanimous goal of each of them raising $1,000, it's going to be specific on how they all do that. Again, Tom's, my board chairs, his is easy. His law firm sponsorship annually, period. Jim's is going to be a little bit more detailed because he needs to rely on 10 to 20 friends, and that's how he brings it in. He does it 3 times a year. He does it. He's got 5 of them. He texts 10 of them, et cetera. So if it works for you guys, I would say go for it. What you need to make sure you're falling back on is at least there's one generally accepted agreement that they're all agreeing to. So they all should, again, be starting with that goal of 1,000. How they all get there can be specific. Take one more question, and fundraising we'll come back to.
I was going to say, do you have that in your commitment form, the goals?
I do, yeah. So our commitment form is outlined how many meetings, that they need to be on at least one committee. If you have committees, some choose to be on 2 or 3. It's all based on time, but at least one committee. Attending the meeting. We actually spell out if you miss 3 meetings technically in a row that are unexcused, meaning they didn't tell me ahead of time they couldn't go. We reserve the right to ask them to leave. I've never done that, but it just lets them know that this is real. Ultimately, your nonprofits have a mission that's impacting lives in your community. Again, whether I'm trying to build more affordable houses, you're trying to stock the food pantry, you put people on your board and they don't show up to help govern, you're putting your mission at risk. That commitment form goes deeper. It mentions the fundraising. It goes over that they have a fiduciary responsibility to the board. It kind of outlines, look at your bylaws first. That's going to be your you have to do these things and they have to be aware of those things. And what are the other things to help make your mission successful? And usually fundraising is where it is. We'll come back to this though. Trusting their expertise. So engaging, how often do you engage? That's going to matter on how big is your board. I've got a 15 people board, huge. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it other times. You might have a 5-person, you might have 7, you might even have just 3, because you might just have your chair, your treasurer, and your secretary as defined in a bylaw. You could even just have a secretary and chair, because maybe the chair is also the treasurer. It really depends on the size of your organization, your budget, and ultimately what you're trying to do. I always worry, I tell people, if you go above 15, luck. It's just a lot of people, and it's a lot of people for you to manage, especially generally nonprofit. You're also gonna have a small staff. So that's why it's a lot for me. It's 15 people I've got to stay in contact. That's 15 one-on-ones throughout the year. Do the math, it's more than one one-on-one a month. And so just managing that expectation is gonna ultimately help you answer on how often to engage them. So with my board with 15, at minimum, it's a monthly board meeting. And that's just because of the size of organization we are, the work we have on our plate. But you as a board, I sit on a board, I'm a treasurer of another board, it's a statewide group, we only meet quarterly. Because again, it's a lot different in what they're doing day to day. The staff is much larger. The board is more of a governing body than it is a working body. My board, or the board that I serve as the director for the company locally in Lansing, that's a working board. Because we are still small, we still have a lot to work to do. We're not statewide, we don't have a staff of 100. So it's just different in how we want to engage and how often you want to meet. A lot of this should be outlined in your bylaws too. At minimum, how often they meet should be in your bylaws. You have to at least convene once a year in the state of Michigan. And it'll be called your annual meeting, because that's what you will be held accountable to. You might say, and that's what ours said, it said at least once a year. And then separate from that, we as a board agree annually, we said it's the first meeting of our year. We're July, June, 15th. So July board meeting, I'm doing commitment forms. I'm getting the board to approve a calendar for their meetings for the next year. So again, you're having all of those conversations right then and there. And that tells them, great, I got to be ready to be meeting every month. Keep it consistent. Don't change it up on them. If you meet the third Mondays at 4 o'clock, do that every single month. It's just going to be the easiest way to try and organize 15 people. Some will miss some of those meetings, some won't. But if you're switching and flip-flopping, you got to set the tone and set the time and set the date and keep it consistent.
I just have a question about board minutes. Are those accessible if they're not private information? I work for a school and in the past they had minutes on the website.
Sure.
They don't anymore.
Sure.
Or does it, I don't know.
The first part I'll answer is gonna define on how you're incorporated. So I represent a 501c3, but we're a private corporation. So I do not have to put my meeting minutes online. I don't have to put my board packet, unlike a government entity. They're required by law to have those documents online. Their meetings have to be public. You could be a private nonprofit and still put those online. I don't do board packets or minutes. I do audit our annual 990, and that's a public document too. I put that online. If you're a community member, that's going to tell you all you need to know. And I say that because things can be misconstrued.
Sure.
If, as an outsider looking into a board packet, especially if it's a board packet from 8 months ago, or it's meeting minutes from 8 months ago, and things get political, especially in the affordable housing world. We've got some people in Lansing who do not like it, just like you're going to have here in Oakland County. And so by that reason, I choose not to put it on. I make people come to me. If they want to know more about our organization and they're not a board member, great, email me. Let's set up a time. Let's have coffee. Let me really figure out what you're looking to do. Your board members, though, should have access to all of that. And that's going to reflect on the size of group you are and how you do that. We do that through Dropbox, an online cloud thing. We pay an annual fee, $1,000 for us every year. Another popular one is Google Drive. You might already use Gmail for your day-to-day. Great, that comes free with you. We use Dropbox, and so all of our board members have access to it. All of their board packets get put in there, committee stuff gets put in there. Can guarantee you though, out of the 15 of them, only one of them actually goes back and looks at it. The rest of them are just wait for the email, they look at the specific one, and then they probably never go back and look at anything else. Get personal with each one of them. We talked about one-on-one. One-on-ones are incredibly important. I would set those up. Again, my July meeting is popular for admin. Again, I'm getting those commitment forms, I'm setting annual meetings, I'm getting calendars for my board members. I'm setting my one-on-ones at that time as well. I book them out 12 months. And so Mary on my board knows, all right, it's July, but I'm gonna be meeting you for lunch or coffee in November. Let's just get it on the books right now. Highlighting your impact. This is getting back to our mission and why we're here, but it's defining the mission with real life examples. Why is this important when considering engaging or motivating a board member? They gotta know what you're doing and why it's important, and better yet, how it's important. If you're new, you might have some work to do. You know, if you're under a year old, you might not have those success stories yet. We're a 30-year nonprofit. We've been in existence since 1992. We've got 30 years of history to be highlighting our impact. And as an ambassador, which is a board member, they got to at least have an elevator speech. If you're a board member, this is a very fun exercise for board members. We don't do it every year. We do it a lot during our strategic planning times. You could do it every year. It puts the pressure on them. And I teach staff about this too sometimes. It's like, let's pause for a moment, stand up. You tell me in your own words, what's our mission? Or you tell me in your own words, what is something our nonprofit has done that you think is a success? And it's just interesting to see them because now they're on their feet. They don't have me talking for them. They don't have a packet in front of them. And so that's an exercise because if somebody gets up and can't answer the question, set aside public speaking and all the fears of maybe standing up and talking. But if they can't tell you at least one good thing about your nonprofit, you as a director have work to do. You got to show them that. How are you highlighting their success? That could be a dashboard in your monthly board packet. How many cans of food did we collect at the food bank in the last 30 days? There's an impact. Or in our work, how many financial counseling classes did our counselors have in the last 30 days? Or however you measure metrics. Usually the good way to answer is that, how do you hold your staff accountable? What are the reports your staff giving to you as a director? But as a board member, they might not need to know the minutiae. They should know that we built a house last year, or that we stocked the Lake Orion food pantry last week. Give them something, because that could be a tool they use when they're out in the community. Maybe they're at the grocery store and they're talking with their friend. What did you do last weekend? Just had a great board meeting. Did you know we filled the Lake Orion food pantry last week? And what, you guys do that? And I'm at the grocery store. Tell you the weird, that you get money and things in the weirdest places, in the weirdest connection. And the best way for your board members to do that and being powerful for you is to understand the impact you're making. I give some other examples out here. How do you share success with your community, your donors, your clients, your staff, newsletter? What's free? Newsletters, social media, an email newsletter if it's not printed. All of those ways should be highlighting your success, and all of that should be useful information that your board members are getting. If you send out a newsletter, are your board members on it? Are they on the email blast? Are they on the printed, is their address on the mail slip to get one of the printed newsletters? If not, add them and make it exponential. This is another area where it's not easy. Just like defining some of the work isn't easy, or holding people accountable, or asking people for money, making it exponential at your meetings isn't easy. But I tell you, work with yourself, work with your team, and first ask yourself, how am I gonna hold myself accountable in the job? What do I expect the board to get from me, and how often? And so for me, it's gonna be budget. That's usually the first thing. Are you on budget? Are you not? Fundraising, staff. If we've got a construction project, great. So that's how I'm holding myself to know if I did a good job. How am I telling my board that? And how am I engaging them? It's going to give them some ideas of how to govern you as a person. It's very odd to have 15 bosses. Some are, you've got to figure out how to do that, how to answer to 15 people. Board and staff relations. Do it, but keep it light. And why? Because you as the director or you as the board member, that's the official relationship. You're a board member, you as a board hire one person, an executive director, a CEO, coordinator, whatever you call it. You then, as that hired person, may have a budget to go hire a team for you, but you should never have more than one person officially answering to the board on paper. That doesn't mean you can't bring staff to your meeting, can't have them report to your board, but our board meetings, I have myself and 3 other senior leaders on our team. So I've got my finance person, I've got my fundraising person, and we do a lot of construction work. So I've got my director of construction. So I'm not a licensed builder, he is. So the staff get to be engaged, but they also know that I'm still their boss, that they're not held and they're not having to answer necessarily to those board members. And I don't mean board can't ask questions or they can't ask questions, you can't have a back and forth. You gotta be very careful though, that they don't feel pressure if somebody asks them something or they do something wrong, that board member gets to hold them accountable. And so it's important to have those 2 people engaged, but make sure it's a light touch and it's an appropriate time to be engaging in. So board members shouldn't necessarily be involved in a person below me's annual review. Why would I have that when they hired me to do that? And just vice versa. I wouldn't bring a staff member to my annual review. Keeping it fun. Everything we do, you have to have. Otherwise, if it's boring, it gets tiresome, you gotta drive it the phone. And so you gotta figure out a way to keep it light, because that's gonna keep your board engaged. There are going to be times, for me, it's monthly, where things are just clunky. They have to be talked about because it's either a part of our governing. Best example is finance report. They're boring if you're not an accountant or you're not somebody like me who likes numbers. Numbers to me tell a lot of different stories. I got a lot of board members and I see them on the screen or in person where their eyes gloss over every time we get to the monthly financial report. Largely because they're not an accountant, largely because they're not involved in the day-to-day of the nonprofit. And so there's just, if you're not one of those 2, it's just numbers on a page at that point. And so how to keep it fun. It's important at your board meeting or just any engagement with your board member or vice versa. One way I do it at every meeting is I take the first 10 minutes and I change it up every single month to talk about something that's not necessarily director board level specific. And so what do I mean? So last month we brought in the Greater Lansing Food Bank. They came in and gave a quick 10 minutes because they just did a whole big move. They've changed their headquarters and all these cool things in the community. It's important for us to know that, not because we are competitors or we do the same work they do, but housing and food go hand in hand. And so we want to know. And so I asked the CEO of the food bank, she came in for 10 minutes, talked about their expansion, how it's improving services, and it was great. What did it do too? It got our board thinking about how can this help our mission? How can this help the work we're doing? Where can we share ideas? And now it's led to me, them giving me some work to do and some follow-up to do with the food bank. I love the director, the CEO there, she's great. And so think about, is there time at those regular engagements that you can carve out some time? Doesn't have to be 10 minutes, it could be 5 minutes. The statewide board, we call it a mission moment. Everybody, it rotates because there's 15 people on that board too. So every quarter we meet a different region of the state. There's a handful of people in each region. So when it's region 4 time, that's me. I'm going to be called upon for a mission moment. And so each person of that gets 3 minutes to share about something in their community that connects back to the mission of that statewide group. Again, it gets out of the normal agenda items, minute approval, finance reports, or whatever it is, and just get the different conversation going. Fun doesn't have to be just at those meetings though. How else are you engaging your board? Do you guys do events for your nonprofit? We host a monthly home ownership class. I invite my board to come volunteer at that. Or on Saturdays, I don't always want to have to get up at 8 a.m. to go do it. And so I get my board to come and help register people, or at lunch, help coordinate the pizza or the coffee. Keep it fun and how they can be of service to you. It doesn't just have to be at the meeting. It doesn't just have to be asking about money, but make sure they're bringing you too. And so they can be involved in other ways. Maybe there's an event like this, and your nonprofit wants to go and be a part of it. Talk about sending a board member. We've got board members in here. That's a fun way to be engaged outside the normal day-to-day of a nonprofit. Questions? We've got 5 minutes. Let's talk about what you want to talk about. Here, and then we'll come back there.
Just a really quick comment back to the, donations, in terms of commitment, what we decided to do is we don't have a goal for a dollar amount. So we have 100% board participation,
Excellent.
giving monthly. If that, and so it doesn't matter.
That's amazing.
$20 a month.
Right.
Or 100.
I love
We don't set that level, but that's the expectation when you come for an interview. If it doesn't happen in the first 30 days, I follow up.
There you go. I love that. So if you didn't hear her, is not necessarily, they don't define a dollar amount, but they define that at minimum, everybody has to donate. And in this case, a month, what a fantastic way to be bringing in money. Another great reason for just the simple of, regardless of the dollar amount, why every board member should give something, whether it's a dollar or more. It's guaranteed there you will come across, if you haven't already, a grant that will require that. They'll actually ask that, you might get points for it, etc. Almost everything we apply for as a nonprofit comes up. Does your board all give financially? They don't ask how much or whatnot, they just say yes or no. Especially if you have a community foundation in your area or any of those groups, they're gonna pick and choose you over another nonprofit because of that. If you answer that question, no, they're gonna wonder, are they ready for us? They might need some other work done first. And so it's definitely a great area to be mindful of.
But are you saying it's the executive director's job to keep track whether the board members are reaching their dollar goals for the month?
For my organization, yes, I'm also, we have a budget enough where I actually have a person who's on staff and all they do is fundraising, so actually that person does it for me. But if you're a smaller nonprofit or you just have one director, the director might be able to report out, but maybe it's the fundraising committee that gets that info from the director and then brings it home to the rest of the board and calls in. Again, it's going to be unique to you on the size of the group you are and who's on your team to help you. If you've got a bigger group, once you get bigger with more staff, you tend to push more of those things on the staff. But if you don't have a staff of that size, somebody should be doing that if it's not a staff. Go ahead.
I have just sort of a comment. I also think it's valuable and maybe you do the same thing. I know getting to know why your board members want to be on the board is so very crucial, but I find it also very helpful for all board members to know why each member is there.
Absolutely.
As an introduction to all of that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like you say, they may be in real estate,
Yeah.
but their background is law.
Yeah.
And so mentioning what their qualities are or their qualifications is helpful because when they're sitting around a board meeting, you know, wait a minute, they're also an attorney, so they're looking at this from an attorney's standpoint.
Right.
I was part, and it's not part of my organization now, but I was part of I was president of a board, I'll say 15 years ago. That whole group, we get together at least once a year,
That's awesome.
outside the organization.
Yeah.
Because we developed such a relationship with all.
Yeah, excellent. All great points.
I was gonna ask, like a lot of organizations, when the pandemic hit, we started doing all of our board meetings to Zoom.
Sure.
And we're still doing that. I'm
Sure.
wondering if some of the dynamics of
Oh, yeah.
involvement by board members would kill because we're still meeting by the.
Yeah. Probably the question of the century right now. And it's not just for boards, staff too, remote work, going back in. I can't say we've perfected it. I'll tell you what we do. We have hybrid. At this point, we actually, in the same system, this is called a meeting owl up here, costs about $3,500. And it comes also, we got a computer with ours, so that's why it was probably that much. But we have a boardroom at our office. And so we put that right in the middle of the room. We didn't have anything beforehand. And now it offers a much more friendly way to be doing Zoom, because beforehand, where we were all at home, Zoom worked because we all had our own computers. But now we're back, our team, staff is back in person. And I've got board members who come now in person. And so I've got 15 people, 7 or so come in. The others like to be remote, some pandemic reasons, some just because it's more convenient at this point. But the laptop didn't really work anymore. Where do you put it on the table? Do you angle it this way, the microphone? And so our board made a strategic decision. We had money, wasn't in our budget, took it out of our savings and authorized me to go investigate and buy a system. This was the one we came up with. You can definitely spend a lot more money and get things more. But if you're looking for a simple, effective meeting owl is what this is called. Because you're right, the dynamics do change. And you got to figure out how to engage people in person and on Zoom at the same time. And what I felt the easiest way to do that is to invest in a camera that you can see everybody. clearly at the same time. But then they feel a little bit held accountable. We also have a rule at our organization, you have to be on camera. If you're joining by Zoom, turn that camera on. If you don't have a camera, well, we might call, we'll talk about how we can get you one, or can you come in person, but I encourage everybody, they don't all do it. I've got a directing board chair who tells me he has spent 50 years and has never had to be on camera, has never had to use Zoom, conference rooms just work, and so he gets the pass. But he also comes in person too. So he gets that pass. But if they're on camera, I encourage them to turn it on. All right, one more question and then we'll wrap up. We'll go here, and if they're quick, we'll do both. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on the new policy?
Advisory board, great. So 15 people is a lot. And so if you still have people you want interested, consider an advisory board. The important thing to remember, two things is why and what are they doing. So we've done an advisory board during our strategic planning process to bring in some outside folks who wanted to be involved. It's also a way to potentially build the pipeline for future board members. The second thing to most consider about is who's going to staff that. So if you're starting an advisory board, guess who's probably going to have to run it is the director on top of everything else they do. It's not to mean that it can't be done. Those are just two things I would encourage the board thinks about before formally forming it. Again, why? And is it something important to do outside the board? And then who is going to staff it?
Mine wasn't like.
Okay.
After.
Okay, absolutely. Contact information's up here. I've got some business cards as well. 45 minutes goes by so fast. Engaging your board members and motivating them is a lifelong commitment. If you're on staff at your nonprofit, pat yourself on the back. You're doing a great job, and this is not easy for any of us. Again, I'm on boards. I work with the board every day, and it's not easy. And I learn something every day. It's going to change every time you get other board members. Just come back to the basics. That's what it's all about. Mission, vision, and values. So they're going to answer always answer any question you have about engaging and motivating your board members. Don't feel afraid to be honest with them at the end of the day. You've got a mission to answer. If they're holding you back, you got to approach that tough conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.